He was, for a time, ranked the single richest human being on Earth. He lives in the largest residential palace ever built. 1,788 rooms, crowned with a dome of solid gold. In its garages sit around 7,000 cars. He flies in a private Boeing 747, fitted with solid gold. He rules his country not as a president and not as a prime minister, but as an absolute monarch. His word is the law. And for decades, his personal bank account and his nation's treasury were, quite literally, the same thing. And yet, if you ask the one question that everyone in his kingdom quietly avoids, the whole glittering empire begins to tremble. Not how did he get so rich, something far more dangerous than that. What happens when the oil runs out? Because every gram of that gold, every one of those cars, and the comfort of an entire nation, all of it is balanced on a single resource with an expiry date. And there is no real plan B. This is the economics of being the Sultan of Brunei. Let's start with the wealth, because it is almost impossible to exaggerate. The Sultan's home, the istana nurul iman, is not a mansion. It is the largest residential palace on the planet. 1,788 rooms, 257 bathrooms, 5 swimming pools, and a banquet hall that can seat 5,000 guests. It cost well over $1 billion, and it is topped with a dome plated in gold. Then there are the cars. Not a handful of supercars, but a collection housed in 110 garages. Some 7,000 vehicles in all, worth around $5 billion, with hundreds of Rolls-Royces, Ferraris and Bentleys among them. He owns 17 aircraft, including that gold-fitted 747. He keeps homes across a dozen countries and an air-conditioned stable for 200 polo ponies. He has owned some of the most exclusive hotels in the world, where a single suite can cost more than most people earn in a month. This is not the wealth of a rich man. It is the wealth of a small country, funneled into the tastes of one family. So where does an amount of money like that even come from? Here is the strange part. Brunei is tiny. It sits on the island of Borneo in Southeast Asia, and it is home to only around 450,000 people, fewer than live in a single mid-sized city. Almost no land and almost no population. What it does have, sitting just off its coast, is oil. When Shell struck oil there back in the late 1920s, a poor, half-forgotten little sultanate was suddenly floating on one of the most valuable resources on Earth. And here is what makes the Sultan different from almost every other fortune we have looked at on this channel. When Brunei became fully independent in 1984, the Sultan took complete control, and the line between his personal wealth and the entire nation's treasury simply dissolved. The state's reserves were, in effect, his own money. That is exactly why, for a time, he wasn't just called wealthy. He was ranked the richest man in the world. And even now, decades later, his personal fortune is still estimated at around $50 billion. Not a shareholder, not a founder, the owner of a country. So unlike so many of the powerful people in these stories, the Sultan really could spend it. And he did, on a scale that reads like fiction. Which leaves one obvious question. If he owns the money, owns the oil, and owns the country, then where exactly is the trap? To find it, you have to stop looking at what he has and start looking at what all of it is built on. Because the entire empire rests on 2 words the whole kingdom would rather not say out loud: oil. And after. Here is the fact that changes everything. The petroleum sector alone makes up more than half of Brunei's entire economy, and the overwhelming majority of everything the country sells to the world. There is barely anything else underneath it. No large manufacturing base, no tech industry, no tourism engine of any real size. Take away the oil and the gas, and the palace, the cars, and the comfort of an entire population have almost nothing left holding them up. And oil does not last forever. This isn't a vague worry. By recent estimates, Brunei's proven oil and gas reserves run to only around the year 2035. Every barrel pumped is a barrel that will never be pumped again. So the question that hangs over the whole kingdom, the one raised in report after report about this place, is simple, and it has no comfortable answer. What happens to the Sultan and to Brunei when the oil finally runs out? And if you think a fortune that large could never actually hit a wall, the recent past says otherwise. During the Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s, Brunei went from a country with enormous reserves and a comfortable surplus to one that suddenly found itself dangerously short of cash. Almost overnight, the era of limitless spending had to end. And then came the part no one saw coming, from inside the family itself. An investigation found that some $40 billion in what were politely called special transfers had flowed out of the state investment agency over about 15 years. Much of it was tied to the Sultan's own younger brother, Prince Geoffrey, whose business empire then collapsed under $10 billion of debt. In the settlement that followed, he had to hand back more than 500 properties and around 2,500 cars. Think about what that proves. Even a treasury the size of a nation's has a bottom. Even money that looks infinite can be spent to the edge of it. The vault is not bottomless. It only looks that way, right up until someone reaches in too far. But the deepest trap here isn't financial at all, because here is what the oil money really bought, and it wasn't freedom. It was silence. Back in 1962, the people of Brunei tried to move toward democracy. There was an uprising, and it was crushed in a matter of days. The constitution has been largely suspended ever since. There have been no real elections, and that is not an accident, it is the arrangement. The oil wealth pays for a cradle-to-grave welfare state. No income tax, free healthcare, heavily subsidized daily life. In return, the citizens give up something quiet but enormous, which is any real say in their own country. Comfort in exchange for control. And the control keeps tightening. In 2019, Brunei introduced one of the strictest religious penal codes on earth, which drew international boycotts of the Sultan's luxury hotels. So the whole nation becomes the gilded cage, golden, comfortable, and closed. And behind the gold, there is another Brunei the brochures never show. Communities still living in real poverty in one of the richest countries on the planet, watching the wealth flow straight past them. So picture it one last time. You are an absolute monarch. You own a country outright. You can buy almost anything a human being has ever wanted. The palace, the jets, the gold. But the one thing you cannot buy is the one thing you actually need, which is time. Your fortune, your throne, and the loyalty of your people all rest on a single resource that is quietly and permanently draining away with no real replacement waiting behind it. You are not trapped by money you can't spend, like the others in these stories. You are trapped by money that runs out. The richest man in the world, sitting on top of an hourglass, watching the sand fall and unable to turn it back over. And that is the quiet lesson hiding under all the gold. We like to imagine that enough money buys total freedom, that if you owned an entire country, you would finally be untouchable. But the Sultan's story points the other way. A fortune built on one single thing is the most fragile kind there is. And power that has to buy silence in order to survive was never really security. It was fear in a very expensive costume. He can command almost anything on earth. The one thing he cannot command is more time. The richest man alive, ruling the most golden cage ever built. A kingdom that can buy everything except a future. If this changed the way you think about what wealth can and cannot buy, do one simple thing. Subscribe. Because once you understand what really holds these fortunes up, you start to see the cracks underneath even the most golden thrones on earth.